I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man, that is a sad clown.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3 Omaha Packs, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
Shout out to our sponsors. Major Team Mortgage, Omaha Laser Dentistry, Exclusively Eye Care, Liberty Core Real Estate, Avier Wealth Management, and Apex Men's Clinic. We appreciate their support.
Hey, are you the type of guy that likes to get up early in the winter to battle your jester? Do you love listening to people drone on and on and on about COVID in the gloom? Would you trust your vision to a guy nicknamed Cataracts? Well, if the answer to any of these questions is yes, fellas, you have bigger problems than you think. Dr. Cataracts, aka Dr. Wolf, can't solve all of your problems, but he can certainly help you solve the problems related to your eye health and vision. You will find many F3 principles throughout his practice. Check him out today at Exclusively Eye Care.
Now let's get back to the gloom.
And we're back. Man, I'm excited for this guy to get his story out there. I've just had some great interactions in the gloom, and whether it be pre-runs or during a workout, and have just been sort of amazed by his leadership, his ability to support other men that are coming out, and just man, we got Home Alone, and I do love your call sign. I think I just love. I'm a huge fan of the movie series Home Alone, so I love being able to say Kevin.
Yeah.
But anyway, man, Home Alone, why don't you start us from the beginning, sort of the EH story, and then would love to hear about the first workout and how you got your name.
Yeah. So it really started 6 months before my first workout. I like to think. I was trying to kind of look back at dates, and T Swift, who's actually my brother-in-law, who, if you're going to have a brother-in-law, that's a pretty good guy to have for a brother-in-law. He had just been not necessarily on me, but just really kind of like, hey man, you would love this. You would be all about this. This would be like right in your wheelhouse. And his first workout, I think, was the 1776. So he's like, it seems crazy, but like it was, you got to come. And I, of course, had the excuses just like everybody else. Like, I don't like getting up early. I would rather, I can work out at home. We've got like a Peloton. I've got weights at home. We got stuff that sounds just way too early for me. It's just too chaotic. And then, he wasn't pesky about it, but he just every once in a while would be like, hey, have you thought about it? Do you want to and then the other two, of course, that are usually associated with him would be Greenhouse and Hey Hey. And they were, they didn't necessarily, really kind of push it all, but anytime it was kind of brought up, we were around them. They're like, yeah, like we go, we love it. So I think it was March 26th of 2022. That Saturday morning, I finally decided I'm going to get up and went to Oracle that morning. Of course, T Swift was like, well, there's a pre-run at 5:30. Like, let's not push it here, okay? I'm getting up early on a Saturday morning. Like, let's keep it the way it is. And so, but did the 6 o'clock workout, and as the rest of the day say is history. I loved it. I enjoyed being around. Even the guys that day. I don't remember who is our Q. It seemed like there was a bigger group as the spring. The weather gets nicer and there's more guys kind of showing up. And we've always talked about that 6 o'clock at Oracle is a great reunion place. So there's a lot of guys there, and having the last name of McAllister. They're just, what do you do? What are, I'm going through the whole name-a-rama part of, I got 3 kids, I got, whatever, I'm a teacher, all that kind of stuff. And finally someone just said, Home Alone. And there it went, Home Alone, that's it. So,
yeah, for Kevin McAllister, makes sense.
Right.
I could have called you Marv or Harry or Kevin. I don't know why we didn't just name you Kevin, no.
Just name Kevin, yeah. No, but Home Alone, it's stuck, and we love the movie. We watch it during the holiday season, and sometimes not during the holiday season. So it was an easy one compared to some names I know guys have gotten. I was like, I can be Home Alone.
Yeah, there's worse out there, and I wouldn't even say they're bad. It's just they take different forms. That's for sure.
Right.
So
right.
You go work out. were you pretty much bought in out the gate, or were you like, I'm just still going to do it once a week when time permits, or what was your progression
Yeah,
on
I was primarily just a Saturday guy for, I would say, 3 or 4 months. I'm trying to think. If I started in March, it was maybe even 5 or 6 months. I was just kind of a Saturday guy, and then I kind of got a wild hair to do a little more. I think it was probably the October of that year. I was just like, hey, fitness wise, I'm not loving where I'm at, and I always loved Saturdays. I mean, I loved going and seeing guys, and like, I was like, maybe I should start looking at more places to go throughout the week. And my biggest scare was, so my wife and I both teach, in the mornings. We still were getting up fairly early, just during the week, to try to get kids out to school and get to school at a decent time. We both try to get to our schools early. And I was like, hey, would you be okay with me like getting up even like a little bit earlier and going? And she has never once balked at the idea of me getting up early and working out. She has been, extremely supportive, and was like, why would I care? Like, if you want to get up early and go work out, like, I completely support that. So it was probably, like I said, October of that year, I started going a little more often. And I tried to start saying, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and stuck to that for quite a while. So, but it goes, with everything, it goes in cycles of, hey, this week we're super busy. Maybe it'll be just a Saturday, or, you know, so. But yeah, that was kind of the start. And then, like I said, then I really kind of started going, regularly Monday, Wednesday, Friday,
Nice.
Saturday. So
What was your
yeah.
we've got all these options, right? We've got Murph sites and pre-running and rucking and weights and all, kind of the whole gamut of
Yeah.
options. Where did you
Yep.
navigate all those and kind of land on some, or where did you?
So I really kind of started Mondays always going to Red Wings.
Okay.
It's not to take away from the workout itself is always a challenge, but it's simple in the sense of, like, you don't really have to think too much about what you're doing. You know the routine, you know what you're doing. The only thing that really changes is the core, but you're doing push-ups, you're doing pull-ups, you're doing squats. Um, so that was kind of my big pull towards that. Also, it's like 5 minutes from my house. So I was like,
Yeah.
that's super simple. Get in the car, get there. Don't have to wake up too terribly early. But yeah, I really started Red Wings on Monday. And then, same site, go to Aldrich for top rope. So I'd go to top rope. Sometimes I go to Catalyst too, especially once I started kind of getting more into running and trying to do. I've done a couple half marathons since joining F3. Like, Catalyst was a great site because that was kind of my day. I was like, hey, I can get my run in.
Yeah.
And then Fridays really like Armory. Again, it's just proximity to my house. So those are kind of the ones that I've kind of fell on. But I always tell myself, like, I need to branch out. I need to find some other place, especially during the summer when I don't have to be at work quite so early. I can get up a little earlier and drive a little bit. So
It is, I think convenience is a big piece. I mean, I find myself just posting out east and I say the same things. Hey, I need to make myself out west. But then you just kind of get in this routine of, well, I know the guys are going to be there. I like going there. It's 5 minutes from my house. So, I mean,
right.
it gets hard. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
You said one of the reasons you started to pick it up more was like your fitness and where you were at the time. I am curious, what was your physical fitness like before joining? What activities did you participate in? Were you working out?
Yeah. So, growing up, I was thinking about this last night as like, I was always in a sport. I was a 3-sport, if you count summer baseball, 4-sport athlete growing up in high school, to where, it was, sports were just a big deal. My parents were both coaches growing up. So it was one of those things where I was constantly around sports. And so, physical fitness in terms of just trying to be active, really before F3. So especially once, 2019 and 2020 with COVID and restrictions and stuff, we were at home a lot. And we did the Insanity discs. We dusted those off and did those. And both my wife and I saw a lot of success in that. But you're just doing that by yourself. I mean, we did it
Yeah.
together, but it was because, we couldn't go out and see other people, so we were just doing that. And then probably about the time I started F3, I fitness wise was not in great shape, and that's part of the reason I only went on Saturdays. It was like, I was not healthy in terms of my eating habits and my exercise, and so that was kind of finally the reason. Like I said, T Swift was not necessarily pesky, but not pushy either, but just consistent with his message of, hey man, you got to come. And it was finally like, yeah, you're right. Like, I need to do more than just the every once in a while getting up. So, and it, like I said, it's gone in cycles. Even when I've been in F3, I had probably after the within my first year being in F3, Chowda really kind of pushed me to do we were doing a Murph challenge, and he and Truly and I we were trying to do, what was it, 12 months of 12 Murphs every month. So we're going to go a full year and do 12 Murphs. And we really kind of went strong on it. And then I threw out my back. I've had back problems since I was in high school from football. And that really kind of curbed that. And so went from, feeling really good, looking at my arms, man, like you're doing all those Murphs, like you feel like you're champion kind of thing, to then taking some time off. And then, like I said, then I kind of got back into running. But, even right now, like summer is, I don't want to say summer's tough, because summer's great when you're a teacher, but there's also a lack of routine. And so there's been times where like things have slipped away. Where it's like, I stayed up pretty late watching this movie. I'm going to go ahead and sleep in tomorrow. And, but fitness wise, I would say before F3, I wasn't where I wanted to be. And, it did help kind of, okay, you can do this without, like I said, you can kind of dip your toe in a little bit. And then when you're really ready, you can kind of full-fledged pledge that you're going to do, like I said, like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, like, so.
Love it, man. A lot of good stuff in there. I want to go back and kind of highlight something you said. So I think what you're describing, I think, is very common for former athletes, right? You're super involved at a young age, and then as you get older, I mean, your activity level drops, but maybe your eating habits don't necessarily, and then you start to see some metamorphosis in your body. And you talked about switching your diet around. Did you actually do that as you got more involved?
Yeah. So my wife and I are always, we are both not big about like fad diets, and we're like, what's going to help you lose weight or help you get in shape is less eating, more exercise, or eating the right foods. So we went through, one of the things that we did, we kind of partnered like workouts, because she was still doing workouts and stuff at home. We kind of partnered our workouts with tracking our calories, and that helped for a long time. And then we just, like everything, life gets in the way, and we stopped doing that. And some of those meals are really easy to just make, and then you're like, well, did you really, like, did we measure this out? Not really. Like, I'm sure it'll be fine. So we've gone back and forth with different meal plans of, just consistent, like eating just good, healthy meals, and and trying to kind of go that route, because like I said, we always tell each other it's a marathon, not a sprint. And weight's not the only measurement of fitness and health. It's a multitude of things. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's good. My wife says something similar, where she doesn't care what I look like or how much I weigh. It's, are you healthy? And as long as I'm working out and eating right. But I'm never going to be one of those guys that counts calories and makes healthy meals and pretends like this tastes as good as the fried chicken that I'm going to get.
Right.
So,
right. Well, and so my wife and I, we did a cleanse a couple years ago, and got really like, both our weights were both really low, and we're like, man, this is great. But we were eating just the nasty. Our kids still talk about, we had spaghetti squash, or squash spaghetti or whatever. And some people may like that, so I don't want to dog on that. Like, if that's your thing, like, that's great. But our kids, every once in a while, when we're eating like regular spaghetti, they're like, remember when you made us have some of that? And we're like, yeah. Never again. We understand. Like,
yeah. It's so tough, and there's so many different ways you can do it. We just interviewed Armando, and if you know Armando, right, you may have heard that he did this like 96-hour fast, right, and he just swears by like it's a great reset. So I was trying to do a fast the other day, and I was like, I can fast for a day, and I made it like 6 hours, and was just I was like, my body needs food. So I'm curious because it does, you think about like the king and the queen and just kind of the maybe the dance that we all try to play. How do you feel today, like in terms of like your fitness goals, overall kind of big picture health?
Yeah.
Like, you feel like you're doing better? Is your back, you're getting less injuries? Like, what's your take on sort of where you're at today?
So in terms of feeling wise, like I went to chiropractor, and I see chiropractor once a month, kind of get readjusted, and my back has been great. In terms of health, like I said, especially now, teachers in the summer, we have more time. So you would think, hey, more time, you can, hey, let's grill the chicken tonight, and let's do. But our oldest, he plays baseball. And so there's a lot of nights where it was like, hey, we got to eat something quick because we got to get to the baseball diamond, or hey, I'll just wait until, I've found that if I wait to eat dinner until later, I eat like worse, because it's just like, oh, well, now I'm like really, really hungry.
Yeah.
So now I'm just going to like, and I've waited this long, like I might as well eat 3 dinners, so that's where I know, like, my teaching colleagues would probably say you're crazy, but like that's where I love the school year, because there's just that consistency in our schedule of like, we eat breakfast, we eat lunch, we eat dinner, same kind of time. So but then fitness wise, especially within the last couple of weeks, I've been really bad, and I've told my wife, I was like, hey, T Swift is someone who I communicate with a lot. So like I said, my wife is his sister, and they talk every day, and so then I can hear him sometimes on the phone like, hey, tell Jake I'm going, I'm going here, tell Home Alone I'm gonna go here tomorrow. Like, I better see him there, So that's one of the things that I do need to get on, is just getting kind of back in my routine of my Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. But
well, it's good to have somebody close to you that can keep you accountable. Because I think that's really where the group comes in for a lot of us, and that kind of that second F piece. I'm curious because you knew at least 4 guys, right, coming in, and I think all 3 of those guys, hey, Greenhouse and T Swift, they all started on 1776, right? So they're a little bit crazy to begin with,
right?
But I guess talk us through that fellowship piece. Like, how did you go about building some of the relationships in the group once you got started?
Yeah. So the first part was just going consistently on Saturdays, and you see some of the same guys and different guys, because different guys decide where they're going to go on Saturdays. And then it kind of turned into, especially using like Slack and Twitter, to kind of find out, okay, hey, I've worked out with this guy, like, oh, looks like he's leading on Monday at the Wolf Den. Well, especially once Wolf Den started, it was kind of one of those where it's like, hey, this is great. Like, I can, it's not that far from my house either. So really just kind of finding where some of the guys I've worked out with, some of the guys that I've done the beatdowns with, where are they, oh, this guy's queuing. Hey, I'm going to go, support that. And I'm going to go try to be there for him. And then you just, like I said, you start kind of building this community of guys. And, again, Chowda and Truly were 2 guys that when we started doing those Murphs together, it was like, oh, we started Murphing kind of anywhere, because Truly would be one that's like, hey, so-and-so's queuing, and I really want to go, because he's going to be there. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. So we'll all go there. Or, Chowda would be like, hey, so-and-so's going to queue at Armory on Friday, so let's meet there. And so you start just building this network of guys. You're like, hey, I've worked out with this guy. I've gone through the beatdown with him. I've been a partner with him. Another one, and this was a couple like Christmases ago. It was either Christmas, I think it was Christmas Eve, or I think it was Christmas Eve. I did a pre-run. It was negative whatever degrees cold. We were in a parking garage, and I did a pre-run with Vandalay. And that was like the first time that he and I had actually just like one-on-one ran around, and just, kind of running with him and just talking about, holiday plans and life and whatever. It was great. because he just, he was there, and we were both, open, and hey, I've seen you at Oracle a bunch, you know. And then that same day during the beatdown, I was partnered up with Cutting Edge,
Hmm.
who of course took over Oracle, after Chowder and I passed the flags. And ever since that day, Cutting Edge and I, I see that he's going to be at one of the workouts, and I just like light up because I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, like, hey, how are you? So it builds through just consistently going and just seeing guys and being around, and like I said, then you find out where they're going to queue and just showing up and then being there. So
Yeah. I love you mentioned kind of this like Murph challenge that you and Chowda came up with, and just the kind of the camaraderie, or, just one guy says, hey, I want to do this crazy thing. And then you get a couple guys that are like, well, I'll do that with you, so that, maybe because I'm also a little crazy, but maybe just because I don't want you to do it alone. And then through that, you just have that consistent interaction, and, continue to go deeper in those relationships, which is awesome. And I guess I'm curious, like, and maybe you were already pretty close with, the trio. We should have a nickname for those three guys for, hey, I don't know. But I guess, have you noticed any changes, or, like in the relationship with those guys, like with your brother-in-law and kind of the group there, or?
yeah, so they, if you know anything about those guys, they have been the thickest thieves since preschool. I
Yeah.
mean, they're just like a tight knit. I didn't necessarily have. I mean, I had a few best friends growing up, but like those guys, I mean, to have, gone through high school and everything together, and then to move back to the same community, and still be a huge part of each other's lives, like that to me is just like, you don't see that as much anymore.
Right.
So it's just kind of crazy that those guys have done that. I would say that it has been. I mean, it gives us another way to see each other. Because my wife and I, like, we would, we went to, weddings and stuff that they were at, and we would see them there, and it was always, a good time. It's always a great time to be around those guys because they're just great dudes.
Mm-hmm.
They're him. I mean, they're high impact men. Like they've got good heads on their shoulders. They've got great families, and so yeah, it's been one of those things where it's been really cool to just get to know them through a different aspect, and being at some of their cues, hearing some of their COTs, like they're just, that those three are just, they're great guys. And T Swift, as much as I'd love to tease and joke and say he's a pesky, turd sometimes, he's a great him. He's a great dad. He's a great husband, like, and he's a great father-in-law, somebody to be around. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've loved getting kind of closer with those guys and getting to know them from a different angle, instead of just, especially with T Swift. No, I married your sister, so you have to deal with me.
Yeah.
Now, are you from here? Are
I'm
you
not. So I'm
okay?
originally from Fairbury, Nebraska, so southeast,
Gotcha.
kind of southeast Nebraska, but
Well, and so I'm assuming obviously you and your wife moved here at some point. I mean, what was it like, your friendship circle at the time before joining F3, and then how did that kind of change? Were you able to get some of those guys within F3, kind of tag along any of those guys?
so in terms of friends, I mean, we somebody told us a long time ago, your friends are going to be, because we were just starting with the whole sports with our kids, and our oldest is, all three of our kids are very active kids, and somebody had said, your friends growing up, like your high school friends and all that, you'll still have them, but the people you're going to hang out with the most and your friends are going to be whoever's on your kids' sports team, those parents. Those are going to be the people you are around. And so there's something to be true. I mean, there's some truth to that, because we do spend quite a bit of time with some of the same parents. And so in terms of friendships, I have a couple really good friends at the elementary school I teach at. We've got quite a few males in our school, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So having a couple friends there, and then obviously friends from college, high school, kind of a thing. But it was one of those things where, I don't know, being an adult, sometimes it's hard to, you don't want to like say, oh, I'm good with friends. I don't need to make more friends. Like I'm good, you know.
Right.
Like as I don't know, as somebody, I've always been somebody who like you can never have your fill of people that you get along with. So it really did help. I mean, just in the terms of, you know, hey, I can't believe that others are going through some of the same stuff that we go through as parents. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
or you know that I'm going through just even as a husband or as an employee, you know, someone who you know, is a community member, those kind of things. So I do think it really kind of sparked a lot of those friendships that then, you know, have continued on. So
I love it. What any experience with like forming a formal shield lock, or you know, any have you had a chance to participate in any of the second F events that we do? Have any of those been helpful in building relationship?
yeah. So in terms of a shield lock, we've I've got a group of guys we've talked about how it's you know we're all busy and it's difficult to try. So I've kind of I kind of sent out the initial message. I talked with T Swift and his shield lock of 35 guys or
Yeah,
whatever it is. You know they've got that ginormous shield lock.
yeah.
But in all honesty, like they were a great resource of like here's how we got ours started. Here's what we did. And so about a year and a half ago, I think I'd kind of reached out to some guys and tried. You know, we're I would say we're an informal shield lock. I would love to be more consistent with that. It's always, again, it's everybody's got stuff going on in their life, but we did sit down. We looked at some different things. We've had some, you know, I wouldn't say meetings. We've had some get-togethers, but it's definitely something that I need to take. And I've told my wife, I've told T Swift, I've told those guys, I need to take more of a leadership role in that, just
Mm.
because I was kind of the first one to communicate out. Um, but that is something that that really I'd like my focus to kind of turn to now that I'm no longer a site queue. I'd like to turn my focus more to okay, let's make this shield lock, you know, a thing. Let's make it tight. Let's make it, you know, the way it needs to be. Help support each other, be there for each other. You know, that's kind of my next steps in terms of shield lock. So
I love it, man. I think it's funny, right? Because you hear about different shield locks, and certainly F3, literature and Q source. They talk about maybe a small group of 4 or so guys, and you're really focused on, hey, how do we support each other, add some accountability. But then we have, I'd say in the last maybe 2 years, right, we've got some of these shield locks that are, like you said, 35 guys or more. But they seem to be really sticky, right?
yeah,
And they're really good at sort of like bringing a newer guy in sort of under the wing. And it's interesting to me, like even reflecting on like, well, how many how many guys do I actually have that would call me on my BS, or that I could do the same to them? Or
right.
it's not something that we as men normally are good at sort of evaluating or even pursuing if we identify a gap there. But
Yeah,
so kudos for identifying that as something you want to work on. I think that's really cool.
yeah.
What about second F? I know we do a lot of like happy hours or maybe trivia nights, or has that been something a lot of times with kids it's
Yeah, so
hard to do, but
yeah, I went to I've done a couple trivias. I'm trying to think of some, you know, I've been to a couple other second F events, and that's something that like I've told my wife especially, you know, some of the happy hours would be really fun, especially during the school year. Hey, we had a long week of school. You know, and I know they've had some like downtown Elkhorn. It's like, gosh, how simple is that? Like that's a
Mhm.
2-3 minute drive. So I do think the one thing that we were kind of laughing about with having being a site queue on a Saturday site is it not necessarily, I mean, not that I'm planning on if I go to a second F on a Friday that I'm going to be there till close. You know, I
Yeah,
mean, I'm
right.
not saying that, but it is one of those things where it kind of puts like, you do have to kind of think about, okay, if I'm going to be getting up and I'm going to making sure I'm leading this thing, like Friday, I probably need to get decent time sleep and, you know, whatnot. But that is something that, the two kind of along with the shield lock, just getting more of those second F events, and even the, you know, some of the things, the third F, trying to kind of get my kids, as my kids get older, I really do want to take them to some of that stuff and be like, here's how we can help out. Here's how we can be a part of our community, even if it's the larger community, not just Elkhorn, but like a larger community of Omaha.
Yeah.
Like, those are definitely things that are on my radar of what we need to do. Just because with having two boys, I've got a 10-year-old and 8-year-old. I want them to be high impact men. I want them to give back to their community and not feel like it's a chore, that it's a joy kind of a thing. So
I love it. And, I hear you saying these are things that you need to do and want to do. But I just want to remind you to give yourself some grace, because with life, with 2 kids, like, free time is a valuable resource. So don't be too hard on yourself. I think it's great that you aspire to do those things, but just a friendly reminder that just do it in your own time. You've mentioned your 2.0s and your M. I am curious, what do they think of this whole organization and your involvement?
Yeah, so it's crazy. So, like I said, with T Swift, that's probably one of the biggest reasons my wife supports it, is because, she's like, well, if my brother Andrew and Hey, and Greenhouse are doing this, obviously it's got to be good if those guys are all part of it, So I've got 3 kids. I've got my 2 boys, a 10 and an 8-year-old, and then my daughter. And I've taken them to some of the 2.0 stuff. And they're not huge fans of like, hey, it's 7 in the morning, and you're like, yeah, well, Dad's been up since 5, so let's, but they've enjoyed it. They're also, they're pretty easy going with, like, once I get home on Saturday mornings or whatever, or once I get home, even during the work week or whatever, they're like, oh, how was F3? Like, what was your, workout like? And then a lot of times too, my daughter, she'll be like, you smell. I'm like, yeah, I do. You're right. I've been working out for the last 2 hours, but they've all been super supportive. And that's part of the reason, like I said, I mean, I've been able to do things is because my wife has never once said, nah, I really don't want you to do this. It's always been yeah, absolutely. If you like, I get it. If you want to do it, that's something you can do. So, but yeah, so they've been really supportive of it. So, and my wife will tell you, the mornings that I go to F3, she goes, you are a much more pleasant person. You're not as grouchy. You're not as, quick tempered with everybody. You just seem really happy. And I noticed that at school too, when I, like, during the school year, because part of it is like, hey, I got the hardest part of my day done early. I had to wake up early. I had to run probably 2 or 3 miles at least. I had to do this hard workout, and then I had to have a hard, mental session. Some of those COTs, you really get to thinking about, gosh, how can I apply that? What am I, how can I be better? And so it's, my hardest part of the day is done, and I'm a much happier person. So
I love what you said. And I agree, right? Doing something hard in the morning, just getting that knocked out. I mean, it compounds for all the other tasks that you have later on in the day. But I'm similar in that I have a problem where the days I don't work out, even when I get home and I'm tired, I have a harder time pretending I'm excited to see my kids. That sounds terrible, but I mean, it just is a fact. It's harder for me to get engaged and be like, yes, I'm here, buddy. Let's rock. So I that resonates very much with me.
Are you or someone you know in the market to buy a new home? Well, if so, check out Major Team Mortgage. They specialize in home purchase and refinance home loans. Their mission is to purposely empower people to experience their good life through building wealth with real estate. Showing up in the gloom is no different than showing up for a conversation around your future of building wealth with real estate. Join the action economy and get in the game with Sasquatch. Text or call John at 402-212-0149 to schedule a time today. Individual NMLS number 1393750. Company NMLS number 2478164. Equal housing lender.
I love that you're sharing it with the kids. Curious as we kind of talk about the third F here, we like to ask guys what their journey has looked like. Did you grow up in a church? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So, like I said, I grew up in a small town, Fairbury, Nebraska. Both of my parents were extremely involved in my church. I grew up Presbyterian, which I always tell, like, really when it comes to denominations, like I've never really cared what I mean, I grew up in the church. So we went to Sunday school. We did the Wednesday night. It wasn't necessarily like, um, religious formation or whatever it was called, logos, but it was Wednesday nights. You were at church. We did a lot of community stuff through our church. My dad is actually, he's on and has been since they built a new church I was probably in middle school at the time. But he was on the building and grounds committee. And so my dad was automotive and woods teacher at my high school. And so for the church, he, was kind of the point guy for the architect and for the construction guys and all that. And so I actually watched him build a church, so to speak,
Cool.
With the help of people. And they're still extremely active in my small town of in their Presbyterian church. So grew up around, we went to church every Sunday, and it was never a burden. I mean, I don't ever remember it being like, oh, we got to go to church. Like I loved going to church. We have Sunday school at 9, and then church service at 10:30. Like it was great. And then like most people, so I went to Hastings College, and Hastings College is actually a Presbyterian, somewhat Presbyterian college. Um, Kind of got disconnected throughout the school year. Wasn't really going on Sundays, but I would come home during the summer and be with my parents, and we'd still go to church every Sunday. And so it was one of those things where it took a 8-month hiatus kind of a thing, but it was always in the back of my mind. I mean, it was always something there. And then really when I graduated from Hastings, I first started living in Wahoo, Nebraska, and I went to the Presbyterian church a couple times there, but didn't. It was kind of an older congregation, and as a young, I was 22, 23. A lot of people were going to the Lutheran church, but I felt like I would be like cheating on my parents if I went to the Lutheran church instead of the Presbyterian church. So I went a few times, but I just never it never really connected, and it was the same. I'm sure it was the same hymns and the same traditions and stuff but I don't know. And then I met my wife, and her parents were Catholic. And I really hadn't thought much with the Catholic Church growing up. I was like, well, I'm not Catholic, but I was, whatever. And she was like, would you want to go with me? And I'd gone a couple of times to the Catholic Church in high school with, previous like girlfriends or whatever. They were like, oh, you should come. I'm like, yeah, great. I'm kind of a traditionalist when it comes to church. I love like the traditional hymns, and I love like the rituals and that kind of stuff but my father-in-law will tell you. So I guess to get back to that. So then I converted to Catholicism, to essentially my wife and I are like, we want to raise our kids together. We don't want to. Why is dad at the Presbyterian church or the Lutheran church, and mom's at the Catholic church?
Yeah.
So not that there's anything wrong with that either. I mean, if that's what, again, people want to do. So I converted to Catholicism, but my father-in-law always says, we're kind of cafeteria Catholic. And if you're like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, we just kind of pick and choose, like, some of the things we do. So I'd say I'm almost kind of a hybrid Catholic Presbyterian. Like I said, those traditions and those rituals, I really do love. But it was just one of those things where really she, and I've told her before, like, you saved me. I was this wild moron who was, trying to find his way, and you led me to where I needed to be. And we try to make it pretty consistent with, we go with her parents, usually 9:30 mass. If not, we try to find different times to go, but we try to make it consistent, try to pass it on to our kids too, of, it's important you go. So
I love it. It's funny. I almost, just the thought that came to mind is like, God knows, every prodigal son, right? Like if God puts a pretty girl sort of in the path back to church, I think we all
right?
kind of follow that,
Yeah.
in some way we get back connected. Oftentimes, at least the way my story goes, similar to yours, right? It was a female that got me interested in church, but curious. you mentioned just like having a common sort of faith to raise your kids in, and just kind of curious what's been your experience. How important has that been? I fully agree with you, but just kind of curious what your guys' experience has been with raising kids.
Yeah. It's one of those things where there are times where they're not as enthused to go.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just like, we always try to talk about like, look at all the things we have, look at all the blessings we have. We can give an hour to God, and we can be there to, so they've liked that, in the sense of there's been times where once we get there, it's just getting there.
Yep.
It's almost kind of like F3, like just get your butt in the pew and you're gonna be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're gonna, so that's been hard at sometimes, just trying to convince them like, hey, just get in the van. We're going to the church. Like it doesn't matter whether you want to go or not. And then it seems like we always walk out and you always feel better.
Yeah.
So, and there's times we've actually talked about, doing some church shopping, just trying to find, and we've tried to tell our kids, like, when they get older, like, I don't care where you go. I just care that you go. And that, you have some type of faith connected to you, to help guide you. So
love it. I think that's a great model and approach. I'm curious, as you think about, your story, right? When I meet you, when I see you out there in the gloom, your light shines, right? You're excited to be there. You're full of joy. Where does that come from? Like, where is that a faith piece? Is that how you were raised? Where does that come from?
I would give that credit 100% to my parents. So both my parents were teachers growing up. They were community leaders. I mean, they gave back to their community, and a lot of it too would be my dad. We laugh. My dad is really, really good at, like, he could be really upset with, like, growing up, he'd be really upset with my sister and I for doing something. And like, we'd run into somebody like in public, and, the whole like, oh, how are you doing? You could just say, fine. He always said, wonderful. I'm amazing.
Yeah.
I'm just great. How about you? And there was one time I still remember growing up, my sister and my dad are two of the same people. And so they just kind of had a blowout fight on the way to school, and I was riding with them, whatever, and we walked into the school, and one of the teachers or one of the staff members who worked there or whatever, was like, oh, good morning, to my sister. And, how are you? And she goes, not great, and kept walking. And later on that day, I still remember my dad just ripped into her. I don't care if you're having the worst day ever. When someone asks you how you're doing, you say, if it's not great or good, then don't even answer, And so it was just always one of those that stuck to me, like, I don't want to say fake it till you make it.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone's asking how you're doing, you're probably not mad at them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay to be, hey, I'm good. How are you? So, but he always was, kind of Mr. Positive. And I tell people, I just try to be positive. And my mom was the same way too. My mom, I always tell people, but, I get some of my leadership skills and some of my vocalness. I feel like I have a voice that carries. I get that stuff from my dad. I was like, but really, then my kindness. Not that my dad's not a kind person, but my kindness really comes from my mom, because my mom was just. She's very kind and caring and very patient. So just kind of a hybrid or a mixture of both of them. And
that's cool.
So I love it.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm for the positivity, but to play devil's advocate here, do you feel like there's ever been times where you've maybe not opened yourself up to help or assistance because you've maintained this heightened level of positivity?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's times. So I coach. I've coached my kids stuff, and I was a high school wrestling coach. There were times, especially where it's like, hey, I'm just trying to be positive, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, somebody, like, just somebody help, like, throw me a line here, like, I need some type of help. And I think that's why I married, like, the greatest person alive, because she knows when those times are, and she's been really good with that. And then a couple of the guys that I coach my oldest son's baseball with, actually one of the guys actually I then help him coach basketball. And in terms of like coaching wise, he's been really good about, I try to be positive when it comes to basketball because I'm just the assistant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then he tries to be the positive guy when we're doing baseball because he's like, I'm just the assistant, But yeah, I would say there's times where, you do have to like, there's a difference between, being positive and being unrealistic. And so I think there are some times where it's like, okay, I'm going to try to be as positive as I can, but it's not, our outcome might not be very positive. So
Yeah.
That's awesome. And, I think that's a good segue kind of into the idea of leadership, right? So we, our mission, right? Invigorate male community leadership. And, you think about like, how do we do that, right? We use like the VQ or even your time as a site Q to sort of create opportunities. So curious if do you remember your VQ? What was that like? What could you share with us from that experience?
So I kind of feel like I have two VQs and I'll explain why. So the beginning of doing F3 and starting to go to Red Wings, I started to do pre-runs at Red Wings, and I hadn't queued yet. And it was one morning, early in my days of F3, and I was running with Blades. And at that time, he was the site queue for Red Wings. He said, "Hey, have you ever queued before?" I was like, "No, like He's like, "Oh, Red Wings would be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's scripted, like it's there's not." That would be a really good VQ. I was like, yeah, that would be great. And I think at the time, Hey was not too happy because I had started at Oracle, and I think he was like, that's where you should do your VQ is where you started. So I did the Red Wings queue, and I remember the COT. I've got a principal. I've been really blessed through teaching that I've had wonderful principals, very supportive, no matter what role. I've switched roles from classroom teacher to media specialist. And my current principal right now is really, he's big into, reading motivational people and following great leaders kind of a thing. And he had given us a kind of a in-service talk about, fighting from the center of the ring and kind of being prepared. And so I remember that was kind of the first COT was just, talking about, hey, you've already came and done your workout. Like, you're fighting from the center of the ring. You're ready to go. In boxing, obviously they talk about you never want to be up against the ropes. Well, then you got to stand in the middle, and you got to take some punches, but you've got to be be ready. And so I do remember that being my first COT and my first Q was at Red Wings. And then I think a couple of weeks, I was kind of shortly after, then I queued at Oracle because I felt bad because I didn't do my VQ there. I kind of felt, like I said, that I let Hey down maybe a little bit. Like, hey, sorry, man. Like I didn't,
Yeah. What in terms of like leadership, tell us about maybe after that Q experience. Like, do you feel like you gained confidence, or was it helpful in building leadership? What's your sort of take on that?
Yeah. It's always one of those things. Like as a leader, you always try to have like multiple traits or skills in your tool set. And so it's one of those things where I've been a head coach at a high school level. I've been coach for youth organizations. I've led committees and stuff on for school. I try to be pretty involved, and a lot of that was just mirrored from like watching my parents kind of do the same thing and kind of understanding. But I really think then in terms of F3, after I got done with that first queue outside of the Red Wings queue, after I did my first queue, it was like, I can do this. I can. It's not. You kind of sometimes you let the workout scare you a little bit in the sense of like, man, I don't want it to be too soft and guys be like, man, we hardly did anything. Well, that wasn't nothing. But I also don't want guys that are like, I'm never going to another one of your queues again because there's no way we can do that. And I'm not such a physical specimen. Like I agree with the motto of don't queue it unless you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things, but I do like to run a lot. And so there's a lot of times in my queues where it's like, hey, we're going to go to the track because I love running on the track if there's a track around.
Mm-hmm.
But I did feel like after that first queue, it was like, yeah, I can do this, and that confidence wise of like, absolutely, as long as, I know what I'm doing and I can set it up. And then after you've queued, a handful of times, I save all the documents on my computer. It's like, even a different site, I can do some stations. I can do some, I can do some things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, what about your time as a site Q? I mean, any goals you had taking over the flag, and any milestones you were proud of and carried over?
yeah. Well, one of the biggest things when Hey Hey came and talked to me, I was like, well, Saturday's a great day because people love going to Oracle, and so luckily, Chowder and I didn't tarnish the site in the sense that people still want to go to Oracle because it is a great site and it's a great place to people, and that was one thing that like I really started to notice as a site queue was, man, we would get, the new guys, which it was always great to have new guys, and then to somehow, keep them to become regulars. That's kind of obviously the goal. So I think one of our goals for, just Chowder and I in general was let's continue to keep this site great. Let's continue to have, great leadership here and to try to continue to pass on this legacy because especially with that site
Mm-hmm.
being the first original site, the last thing you want is people to be like, yeah, we don't really go, we gotta, and I go back to, I haven't been to another Saturday site other than we went to Bunstown. Is it Bunstown on Saturday,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We went to Bunstown for a site swap. We don't want people to not go to Oracle. We want people to go other places, but then always come back to Oracle at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of our biggest goal was let's just continue. And we had such great site queues before us. I mean, if you look at the, the list, I mean, Chowder and I are just a blip on the radar compared to some of those guys. So, um, like I said, it was an easy yes. I would like to be the site queue, but it was definitely a we've got to keep this tradition. We've got to keep this place going, kind of a thing.
Heck yeah. Curious, because you've got at Oracle, right? It's a Saturday site, which, as guys get busy with kids and that sort of stuff. And then you also have the two times, right? Which is can
Mm-hmm.
be challenging, as you're trying to just manage that. Any advice or insight that you would have for other guys as they're leading a site, maybe how to navigate the complexities of the role there?
Yeah, so I think the nice thing was it was both Chad and I.
Mm-hmm.
So he is if he wasn't a club promoter in a previous life, I don't know what I mean, because there would be times where we would look at the schedule and we'd be like, man, like we got a bunch of slots to fill. He'd be like, don't worry, I'm on it, and he just like a couple hours later be like, hey, I got all these. These are if you can get these all down. So he was a great like I said, promoter for that, and did just such a. I mean, I would have scrambled a lot if it was just me. So I loved that I had Chowder there, but also Hey Hey and Vandalay and Cheap Seats. I mean, talking with previous site queues about things. I mean, they were fantastic resource. None of them ever were like, come on guys, get it figured out. They were always willing to help.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think sometimes kind of with we talked about that positivity and kind of keeping up the it's everything's sunny here. I think there's times where you can reach out and be like, hey, we're kind of in a bind, what would you have done, because those guys were such a great resource, to help out. And then there were times where even just they would be like, hey, you need somebody? I'll be there. I'll queue it. I mean, reaching out and finding guys, not even just IQs, but just guys in general, like, hey, we'd love to have you come. Yeah, I'll do it. Perfect. So,
Yeah.
Nice. Well, talk to us a little bit about the flag pass. How'd you find the guys? How'd you know you found the right guys?
yeah. So, one of the beauties of being the site queue at Oracle is there were a lot of times where, it was easy to do what we call like the trifecta. I'd pre-run, I'm going to stay for the 6, I'm going to stay for the 7. And so really being at the 7 o'clock Oracle site, it's kind of one of my favorites because you usually do get a little bit smaller group.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the guys that I consistently saw at the 7 o'clock was Cutting Edge, and I'd worked out with LaserJet. I'd done a lot of pre runs and beatdowns and stuff with him too. So just kind of talking to Cutting Edge, he's a great guy, and so is LaserJet. And so it was really kind of one of those things where we were trying to look for who are guys that are consistently here to begin with. Because the last thing you want to do is like ask a guy who, hey, you've been to Oracle a couple times, do you want to lead it? And they'd be like, you know, I don't know. And so it really became clear to both Chowder and I, and Chowder kind of brought up, to me like, hey, what are your thoughts on LaserJet and Cutting Edge? And I was like, that you couldn't have picked two better guys
Mm-hmm.
to take over for us, because again, they were already going, they were consistent, and they're just great guys. And they had we kind of met with them, a couple months before the flag pass, and we tried to sit down and kind of talk to them about what are some questions that they had, what were some issues that maybe they thought would come up. And then when we would do some of the workouts, I would, okay, this is how we do the attendance, and this is how we do, some of those different things. So, yeah, it really became clear, like I said, after Chad had kind of brought to my attention, hey, what are your thoughts? I've talked to these guys. I'm like, you really picked two great guys, because they definitely represent, high impact men, and high impact men who are at Oracle, who are consistent. So,
are they related? Are they brothers? No. Okay.
No.
I don't know why in my mind I thought they might have been related, but anyway, so we can edit that out. It's so cool to just hear your journey, your story, and I guess one question that maybe comes to mind, and maybe may ask you to get a little bit vulnerable, but what have been challenges for you in life? What do you feel like you've maybe overcome that's gotten you to this place where you are a great leader, giving back to your family, your community, anything in that space that maybe you'd be willing to share to kind of give hope to other guys?
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of times where I've just been like, hey, I'll just do it myself. I'll just do it alone. I think about, when, like I said, when my wife and I were consistent and accountable for each other, it was great. But then, one of the things we talk about is, because we love each other so much, we're not always like pushy about, hey, you should get up and work out. Like, so then I started doing stuff on my own, and I'd go up to Common Ground and lift and run and stuff, but it felt very lonely.
Mm.
And it's one of those things where I think there are a lot of times when I'll just do it by myself. It's just easier, then I know how it's done the way I want it to be done, and I can do the things I want to do. And so I think probably one of the biggest things with joining F3 was you had guys that had similar goals in mind, and they keep you accountable. But when you've been gone, if you've missed or you haven't been consistent, you come back. Yeah, there's maybe a poke or two about, hey man, where you been? But it's never it's always but we're glad you're back.
Mm.
And so I think, in terms of my fitness, when I try to do it by myself, I suffer tremendously, because I'm not consistent enough. And so I think just having that piece of guys that I literally do, I'll get out of my car and I'll see them and light up, because I know I'm going to have either a great conversation or a great beatdown with these guys today because of who they are. I think that's been probably the biggest challenge, is just trying to kind of, hey, it's okay to rely on other people. Not necessarily rely on other people, but it's okay to try to be around other people to get to where you need to go.
Yeah.
And ask for help if you need it, or ask for support. That's always kind of been a biggest, challenge, because like I said, it's always been I can just do it. I'll just do it myself. I'm sure it'll work out fine. And it's like, oh brother, no, it won't. Like,
absolutely. Well, I love that. And I think it's just a great reminder for all of us, right? Of like, you don't have to do this all alone. And honestly, right, some seasons of life, you may be knocked down to where you can't, you absolutely can't get back up without somebody, pulling you up or letting you lean on them. So I love that reminder. One of the things we like to kind of get from guys sort of as we wrap up here is just, where are you at today? Where do you need prayers? Where do you need encouragement? If we see you out there, anything we should ask you about or check in with you on?
Yeah. I always feel like as a dad, I kind of hold my kids to high expectations, but also at the same time, I always feel like I'm, not maybe not doing enough. So I always love when people want to talk about kids and, whether it's sports or things they're doing at home. Because I do. I have just such an amazing wife who, family is so important to us, and we love having, the summers together to be with our kids and to help be around them. So family is always, something that, I love being a dad, but there are times where I'm like, man, I see all these other dads out there killing it, and I feel like, I'm not necessarily that I'm just a bump on a log, but also like, gosh, what are some things we can do? And then the other thing is just continuing to be consistent on showing up and being there. I feel like if I get a text from somebody, man, I want to follow through with that. Yep, you're right. I need to be there. I need to show up. And sometimes, especially with T Swift, I've probably gotten too comfortable with him. If it's just him, it's like, we can both, I'll pass,
Yeah.
But sometimes if it's out of the blue, like, hey man, I'm gonna go, do the beat down at this place. It's like, well, yeah, I'll be there. So that's the biggest thing: consistency, and then just like I said, any advice parenting, I always take. So.
I love it. Well, I just want to affirm you as a man, as a leader. Just your story has been great to hear and really encouraging. I know guys will listen to this and just identify with a lot of the things you shared. So just appreciate you and the value you've added to, I know, our group and the community here. So it's been great. Let's do a little name-orama to wrap us up.
Let's do it.
I'll start us
Yeah,
off.
absolutely.
Brandon Fleehardy.
Jake McAllister.
No, I start.
Jake McAllister, 37, Home Alone.
No, you got to go last, man.
Oh, I gotta go last.
You got to go last. Yeah.
You're definitely
That's how we do it. It's got to. This
is
is your episode, right? So the last thing people hear has got to be
Okay.
your name.
Okay.
Here, I'll start as Brandon Fleehardy, 38,
Okay.
The Plague.
The Plague. John Whitworth, 32, Pony Express.
Pony. Nay.
Jake McAllister, 37, Home Alone.
Kevin! I always picture the mom on the plane, when they're like, they just remember they forgot him at home, right? And it's Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love it. This has been great, man. Appreciate your time. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you
it,
guys.
boys.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Great.